Hello, this is Dr. Dave Massac talking about reciprocity.com, the sharing economy proofreading platform that I'm trying to build. And in this particular video, I am going to talk to you about how to become an expert in something, in anything. What are the ways to become an expert? And in fact, it is incredibly easy, but really, really stinking hard to become an expert in something. And what that requires is deliberate learning and deliberate practice. And that will be a lot. There will be a lot of practice that will be involved to become an expert in something. In fact, Anders Ericsson at my institution, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you can look it up. I'm at a large state institution. I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. And Anders Ericsson, brain fart there, right? Anders Ericsson mentioned or studied how people become experts. And he studied that for a long time. He's been studying it probably for 30 years now, how people become experts. And what he found is that the best people in any particular domain spend at least 10,000 hours doing their thing, but being very deliberate with that thing that they are doing, right? So you can learn anything doing this. You can learn how to memorize large numbers. You can learn how to become an amazing musician. You can learn, if you imagine when you're watching a video, I want you to think about when you're watching a video and you think that you are there, that you're watching you're watching a movie and you are there. Well, that required an actor or an actress that knew what they were doing. They wanted to bring you in. And in order to get to that point where they bring you in and you are like, wow, I am that person, that requires so much practice, so much deliberate practice. And the reason why I'm talking about this in this particular video, I was out playing baseball with my kids this morning, right? So now it's a Sunday morning. It's beautiful outside. And we were outside playing ball. We were practicing. So I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. And those guys were so exhausted. They were having such a hard time dealing with it because I was making them practice, right? Practice throwing, practice catching. We weren't just kind of going out there and actually just kind of hitting the ball around and stuff like that. We were doing throwing practice. We were actually getting out there and hitting off the tee on a regular, on a basis. I make them do probably about 30 hits at a time and make them throw about 30 times in when we do these practices. But here's the thing, what happens is that it is really incredibly hard for them and they hate it. They hate the entire process at that moment. But after, when they break through that stage of hating it, they really, really love it. They start to see that, wow, I'm making progress. I'm throwing a little bit harder. And it requires a substantial amount of focus and dedication. So how can you actually do this deliberate practicing? Can you get to this 10,000 hour, this big grand number, and how do you get better at something? And again, I'm not expecting my kids to become pros by any means, but I want them to enjoy the game. And in order to enjoy something and get better at something, you have to do it a lot. Same with these YouTube videos I'm putting out. At the beginning, they stink. It was really hard for me to do this. I wasn't disclosing a lot of stuff. I was just kind of sitting there and doing that kind of stuff. But I'm getting better. I hope I'm getting better. I feel like I'm getting better. I'm getting better at presenting, at least in the classroom, which is a really cool side benefit of this. But the only way I got there was through this deliberate practice of doing it all the time, doing it over and over and over and over and over again until it became really good and it became something like second nature. And that is what the issue with deliberate practice. Every time I do these videos, I make sure that I'm thinking about a particular thing to make sure I get better at that, right? So right now I'm making sure that I'm a lot more excited. I'm a lot more smiling, all that kind of stuff that matters. It really, really matters to do that kind of stuff. And when I'm out there, I make sure that they are standing the right way, that they have their hips the right way. I make sure that they are stepping in the right way just to make sure that they can throw, they can hit the ball in the right direction. And that is really tricky to do. So how do you do this deliberate learning thing, right? What's the secret? Well, you have to focus on key actions that lead to performance, right? So that is the important thing, to focus on the key actions that lead to performance. Not everything you do is going to have a very large impact. There's usually about 20% of the actions that you perform are going to have a large impact. They're going to have 80% of the impact, right? So that's the Pareto principle. It's been around for a long time, but basically it describes the vast majority of human actions and the distributions behind the outcomes of human actions of anything in the world. In fact, most things behave this way, that only 20% of something leads to 80% of something else, right? So I want you to think about this. What are the things, if you're doing something right now, I want you to apply this right now. I want you to think about the things, the 20% of something that's leading to 80% of something else. So with playing baseball, I noticed that just having the proper stance allows you to throw in the right direction, right? You can't possibly, if you're standing on your side, it's really hard to throw way off. You're going to throw off, but you can't throw really far off. So just having that stance and having that proper stance, that's the, that makes a huge difference. So learning about those particular small things that lead to 80% of performance makes a huge difference. So that's the first thing you want to do, is focus on that. And that often requires somebody helping you and coaching you at that moment. So that is a key thing, is focusing on that. Having somebody maybe coaching you and allowing you to get better and to improve, that helps. You can do that in your mind, right? You can take a step back and think, what am I doing? What can I improve? What is it that is so important? You could be your own coach when you're doing that. In fact, that's what a lot of people do. That's what you have to do. Once you become an expert in something, you have to be your own coach. You can get somebody to coach you and help you at the same time. That's going to help out. But then you have to also think about you being your own coach. Then, once you figure out what that particular action is, you got to figure out how to make that action pure and make sure that there's very few quality mistakes or errors in that particular action. So you're focusing on purity, and the way that you do that is you repeat and 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 you repeat over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until it becomes so second nature that you're just doing it, and you don't have your cognitive, the stressor on your mind, right? So you can think of your mind as a big computer. That's it. It's a really, really efficient computer. In fact, that's what computers are modeled after, is your mind. If you don't know that, then that's what they're modeled after. That was sort of the analog that we were thinking about when designing computers. And you have to think about, you have to do that action until you are not thinking about that action anymore. It just becomes second nature. And you do that over and over and over again. And guess what? That action will get all the more better when you get to the point when it becomes second nature. You're not thinking about it. You have it down pat. And then after that, here's the other thing. What you'll realize, so this is the third step. Now, third and fourth step are basically the same thing, or in different directions. You realize that there is going to be another moment where there's 20% of the problems are going to cause 80% of the actions, or 20% of the actions are going to lead to 80% of the performance. So something else. So it's a tweak at that moment. And this is where it becomes even more important to get a coach, a better, bigger and better coach to help you out, because they're going to identify those particular really subtle things. So there's no way I would even attempt to coach a major league baseball player. I don't know anything about that, right? So I'm so far out. I'd be so far out of my league. But I know that there's some people that can, that have performed at that level, that they are great coaches at that level, and they know those little tiny refinements that allow you to perform. Same with a physician, right? Like I could probably tell, I could tell maybe, I could probably go until somebody is 17, 18, 19 years old and tell them sort of basic biology stuff and basic stuff about your body and things like that, and get you to, maybe even that's even a stretch, maybe as a 12-year-old, right? Like I can get to that stage where I can coach somebody and teach something about all those different things. But a physician has to study for a long time under somebody, and they start learning all of these little refinements, and they get this expertise, and they start learning all these tiny little refinements at how to actually do something and get better at something with that particular thing, right? So they learn all about the sort of medical ideas and pharmaceuticals, all this kind of crazy stuff. They're learning an expertise in a very, very fine area that allows them to perform. And you have to, if you want to become a surgeon, you have to sort of narrow down in that certain surgical type, and you do practicums and all this kind of crazy stuff that you just start narrowing down until you become so good at that one particular thing, because you've had all of this practice and you've narrowed down in this practice, that you can see things that there's nobody that's not a specialist would ever see. They would not be able to see it. They just can't see it. There's no way that they could see it. They just don't have the practice there, right? So it's the same thing as me as a professor. I often get this critique, you're just a youngin, right? You don't know a lot. You haven't had practice and all that kind of stuff. But guess what? We do learn a heck of a lot of stuff. And we start narrowing down until we become a real expert in that area, that we actually do have something to say. And I'm not saying I'm an expert right now in any sort of means, but we do have something to say, right? That's all I want to say. So the fourth thing that you could do, and this is similar to the third thing, is the third thing was focusing on sort of the positive aspects of something, right? Figuring out what is leading to performance. But there's also a negative aspect, that you can understand what are the particular things that lead you to not perform, things that are leading to you to fail, right? So then you start trying to remove, deliberately thinking about, okay, I gotta think here. I gotta think to remove this particular thing. And that's what you want to do, is you constantly are both looking for things that are improving, making you lead to improvement, those actions that lead you to improvement, and remove those things that lead you to failure. And those things are really critical and important to think about, how those two different things work, and then they end up reinforcing each other. And then that's how you do the deliberate learning. And then the thing is, you have to do that hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. You have to do it. That's why we got to the 10,000 hour rule, is we have to do that so many times it just becomes obscene. It becomes, nobody's going to do that unless you really are focused on doing that. To get to 10,000 hours, it's a lot of time you have to spend doing something over many, many years, that you have to get to the stage where it becomes like amazing, right? And that's what you have to do to get to that point. Nobody else is going to do that, because they're not going to require the commitment to do that. There's, 3 different things that would suggest that make it so difficult to do. The first one, it's going to require a lot of resources. It's going to require a lot of time. You got to focus on that, and you got to keep doing it over and over and over again. You're going to have to make commitments that you can't do these certain things while you're doing this one particular thing. That's what deliberate practice is, right? You have to commit to, if you want to become a world-class musician, you got to practice probably 3-4 hours a day. And that is what you have to do. You have to do that over and over and over again every day. And you know that those 3 or 4 hours, that is your time. You got to make sure you tell other people, that's what I do in that time. There's, I'm sorry, I can't do something else in that moment. You have to make that commitment. It's a really tough thing to do. It's also going to be very, very painful when you're doing this, because it's so emotional, right? It's so taxing on your emotions. You can probably look at my, a couple of videos ago, I was lamenting about traffic of getting to a website. And it was really emotional. It was really emotional for me. This is something that I'm dedicated to, and I've been pushing hard at it. But, the traffic that I have is peanuts. But I know that, maybe it'll come. That's to another point. I'm more excited about being able to practice and becoming a better presenter. And, I'm loving this. I really love doing this sort of YouTube stuff and trying to become a better person, a better presenter, and, learning along the way. That's really what I'm trying to do. The third thing that you have to do is you are going to realize, so one thing you're going to realize, it's going to take you 80% of the time so you're going to do something, it's going to stink. For 80% of the time, it's going to stink. It really stinks. And then that last 20%, all of a sudden things are going to click and it's going to get easy and you're going to feel like you actually are performing. You're doing better, right? So that 80% gets you to the point where you can get to the 20% that allows you to perform better. And I see that time and time again, whether it's in the classroom, whether it is my own performance, whether it is my kids' performance, whatever they're doing, if they're writing, if they are, they're out there playing ball, I can see it, that it's just such a struggle for 80% of the time. And all of a sudden it's like, it clicks, right? That's it. It just clicks. And then it's that 20%, you just do a little bit of reinforcement and then it sticks. Right, and then you're all of a sudden at another level, which is really cool and exciting, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize, and it requires all this effort. Then all of a sudden it clicks, and in fact, there is, now I'm blanking on the name, but there's a professor. I think she's Leslie Perlow is her name. She's at Harvard right now. She has this punctuated equilibrium model that explains exactly that's what happens. It requires 80% of the time, and then all of a sudden that last little bit, everything comes together, right? And that is typical. That is a really typical sort of way that human behavior, the way that the world works, is that all of a sudden at the end things will happen, right? There'll be these tipping points that will happen. They'll get to things will gel and just magic will happen. It'll be magic, right? It'll feel like magic. That's really what it feels like. When it gets to that point, it's like, wow, I get it now. I didn't get it, and now I get it, right? It's not like it's like, oh, this gradual continuous improvement thing. But it's like you're going along, you're like, I don't get it. And then all of a sudden, I get it. Right? It's like solving math problems. So I'm an engineer, right? When I was in school, I'd do a ton of math problems. I'd be like, I just don't get this. I don't get this. And then all of a sudden you get it, right? And that's really what happens when you do this, when you become an expert and you do this deliberate practice thing over and over and over again. You really just start getting it. And you realize that struggle, that 80% of the time, that effort that you're putting through, it does pay off. And you have to realize that in your mind, that if you stick with it and you continue to progress, maybe it's not that particular goal that you were initially going for, but something else is going to happen that is going to be really cool and amazing that you just didn't expect to happen at that moment. And then you just get it, right, of what it's all about. You get it, of what it's all about. And that it is often really, really hard to define. That's called tacit knowledge. There's a huge literature on that in academia about tacit knowledge, that there's an it that we just don't understand. It's not clear and it's hard to talk about what that particular it is. But you need to do the practice to get to that it. You need to do the deliberate practice. So if you want to get better, what I encourage you to do, whatever you're doing, and I know that there's probably people that are knitting, that are doing florist stuff, that are, becoming gardeners, that are getting out there and, maybe they're practicing baseball. Maybe they are learning to be a better writer. Maybe they're learning to be an editor. Maybe they are learning to, just get out there and become a better electrician, all that kind of crazy stuff. Just get out there and practice that skill and focus on the deliberate practice. Focus on what you can do to get better at something and just keep focusing on that, and it will come. It takes a long time, and then you will get it. You yourself will get it. It will become easy, and then you'll be like, okay, now I know what he's talking about or what she's talking about, right? Like it will come to you, and that's what you have to do. So if you like these videos, do the old thumbs up. If you like this one, yeah. If you could also leave a comment if you want. You can also and if you hated it, and that's fine. The reason why I put that in is I just like that sound, right? I think it's hilarious. So the other thing you could do is watch the old videos of all the things I'm trying to do. You can see my own progress that I've been going through and how it's becoming better. I'm enjoying this process. It's becoming a lot of fun. And the other thing that you can do if you want to help out in any sort of way, once you watch those videos, I encourage you to do that. You could just look at reciprocity. The E is about the 3. And you can see, the old videos are going to explain what it's about, what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help out other people as much as I possibly can. Try to just be a genuine, decent person. And that's it. Have a good day. Take care. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.